Hey everybody, what's up? Michael Dean Jarman here, having a lot of fun rocking the Labels Ain't Stable shirt. And just a reminder, if someone is, doesn't matter if someone is black, white, gay, straight, boy, girl, Democrat, Republican, cop, civilian, rich, poor, they're a person. All these labels ain't stable. We're people, person, people. You know what's funny about this one, cop, is that it seems that when we don't want police officers around, they're cops. But when we need them around, they're police officers. And that's another indication of just this, the polarizing, the dual purpose, that we put law enforcement officers in. That really isn't fair to expect such a polarizing scheme out of fearless men and women who signed up for that job of public service. But that's not the only one. We do it to judges, we do it to commissioners, we do it to lots and lots of people where somehow, some way we have put them in these situations, these roles where it's inhuman to expect these things of them, especially for a judge who will go from, helping two teenagers decide, how to change their name to determining a prison sentence for capital crime, all in the same day with mountains of reading in between. It's just not fair, but it is indicative of some of these, why we're seeing some of these challenges that I'm going to talk to you about. So, jumping into this, the truth is never pretty, but the results always are. So it shouldn't be surprising that I'm not pretty, well, at least not on camera anyway. This video isn't pretty. This is just me in my little conference call space. I got my some old work gloves hanging on the wall. It's just a reminder to me of the work that needs to be done in Utah regarding all this that we're going to talk about. But what this really, what I'm about to share with you isn't pretty either. It is one of the ugliest truths you'll ever hear, with millions of victims who were deceived by people they were tricked into trusting. I don't know why, but for some reason about 6 years ago, I started to figure this out. And what I'm sharing with you is sort of the results of 6 years of invisible work, of sharing my story, hearing other people's story, and just taking notes and watching and observing, no matter how many times I got my own teeth kicked out. And yes, I do know that my front teeth are broken and have been repaired more than once. So thank you, some of you, for pointing that out or asking what's going on there. Sometimes I also get deaf in one ear, but hopefully that's clearing up. But yeah, it's been some rough stuff learning this, but with a lot of good resources, I've been able to survive and find other victims who have, and have been able to prevent other people like you from becoming victims. And that's what's so important, but there's more to do, and we got to put an end to it. So you're about to see why some of my nicknames are the Trauma Geek or the Corruption Geek. And this is going to be a serious geek out about corruption details in Utah from the top down. If you just want to get to the dirty laundry, some of the names and all that, I'm going to put that on the next video. But this is the intro to really what is going on and why it is happening before we get into that rough stuff too. This is really about sick people hurting other people. I'm doing this to protect victims by putting an end to the sickness. It is a lot to unpack, and I know it's going to sound crazy because of that, but I promise you what I'm about to share with you is really happening. The sickness I'm talking about is that in Utah, there is no law for attorneys, commissioners, judges, and the courthouses, human resource departments to follow. There's just only the illusion of it. This means that parts of Utah's courthouses are like a zoo of primates with no real zookeeper to lock the cages up at night. Because of this, the primates are allowed to do horrible things in different dark corners. But just like the courthouses, not all of the primates have access to the same dark corners. The sickness is spread in Utah's courthouses in three ways. Either one, they are too old-fashioned to know it is a sickness. Two, they are cheap pawns, thinking they're just doing a favor or two every day in exchange for a favor or two for them, and they don't really know how dark this sickness is. And three, they are ringleaders who are intentionally spreading this sickness to profiteer off it in more than 20 secret ways. I call these 20 secret ways poisonous pills, and I discovered them from sharing my own horror stories and then other victims reaching out to me and sharing their horror stories. One form of proof that this is happening in Utah's courthouses, especially the Matheson Courthouse in downtown Salt Lake City, is that the zookeeper, who is supposed to supervise attorneys in Utah, is actually not an office of the state of Utah. In reality, it's its own separate private corporation that has been allowed to have a deceptive name for more than 90 years. It is known as the Utah State Bar. The state of Utah does require attorneys to be a member of Utah State Bar to give the illusion that Utah State Bar supervises its 10,000 or so member attorneys. But Utah State Bar is also funded by those same attorneys it's supposed to supervise. So, because it is funded by private cash, it doesn't really want to supervise anybody. As time goes on, this profiteering by Utah State Bar allows different attorneys, commissioners, and judges to scratch each other's backs as certain profiteering groups form, and then certain attorneys in those groups become commissioners and judges and members of other deceptive offices like the Guardian Ad Litem office or members of other deceptive groups. Inside the Utah State Bar, it's set up so that as piles and piles of complaints are wheelbarrowed in every day, they are ferried from one deceptive corner to the next. This way, those tribalistic people who pretend to run the Utah State Bar can avoid any culpability for knowing about the horrors that thousands of its 10,000 members are committing. Instead, they can just keep ignoring the complaints and pointing fingers at someone else. The counterintuitive nature of this, given the critical role it is supposed to fulfill for vulnerable people instead of its members, is so extreme that there is no way this is by accident. It is deliberate beyond question. This system really is a zoo with no gatekeeper because it profiteers off forcing vulnerable people to antagonize each other for its own financial gain, no matter what kind of dangers or risks and challenges that brings to children caught up in the middle of it. This system is really a zoo with no gatekeeper because it forces people to use its deceptively privatized profiteering system that can be manipulated without requiring the manipulators to represent all people in the system. This system is really a zoo because of how deceptive so many other offices have to be for it to even exist. The cases this zoo exploits include collection, eviction, custody, divorce, immigration, elderly matters, and more, and never should have been allowed to be exploited by a deceptive profiteering system in the first place. The horror is that while you and me and so many others were holding up the flag of the greater good, thousands of these primates were selling off the bottom for their own gain. But the good news is, with all this being discovered and exposed, all that's left is a flag that needs a new pole, and the primates can't sell it off. Part of the reason this deception has been allowed to go on for so long is because the people in charge of regulating these offices weren't put in those positions because they are bright. It's because they are the opposite of bright, and I'll let you interpret that however you want. It also might come as a surprise to many of you that there is a large percentage of these primates from the top down that are on the autism spectrum. and what they do is an insult to others challenged with autism. They don't ask questions, and they regurgitate onto their constantly rotating staffs of well-intending people whatever distractions they are told to regurgitate upon them. This keeps any well-intending staff members in offices like the Salt Lake office of the FBI, the Judicial Conduct Commission, which isn't really a commission, it's just one person in a stinky office miles away from the Matheson Courthouse, the Administrative Office of the Court, Child Services, known in Utah as DCFS, and that deceptive Utah State Bar. It keeps them all kidding themselves, overburdened and overwhelmed with trivial things instead of putting an end to these real horrors. An example of this is how every time reports about this or something else gains momentum, it's overwhelmed with stories in the media about aliens or spaceships or something else designed to occupy certain people's imaginations. And the ones about aliens and spaceships are silly because intelligent people laugh them off, knowing that they're really just jet-powered drones designed for the purpose. And the drones they use to trick people about these aliens really are the way jet airplanes that we travel in should be built. But that's another story for another day. But you can see how easy it is with a little bit of technology to trick people and overwhelm and get them caught up in things while other horrors are allowed to go on. So as this information continues to come out, you can probably expect more stories about aliens to come out too. And hopefully you'll just laugh them off and head on over here to utah.dap.com and pledge a monthly donation to support this cause so we can put an end to these horrors. All this is why horrible things like this go on in Utah and around the country, and is why Utah either needs me as governor to fix it, or it needs the feds outside of Utah to call on the Insurrection Act and take over the governing of Utah until the government of the new Utah can be put in place. Who knows, maybe that will include me too. That process can also include the CIA outside of Utah, conducting psychological evaluations of thousands of Utah State Bar's imposter attorneys, commissioners, judges, the current governor, the current attorney general, other politicians, and plenty of office directors who are a tribalistic part of these deceptions, to determine how far on the autism spectrum and other spectrums they are, like the glob of Gothling. If you want to know more about the spectrum of the glob of Gothling, browse one of my PDFs found at originsofabuse.com. Horrifically, what all this adds up to is that we have dark autistics, sociopaths, and psychopaths all exploiting vulnerable people from all walks of life for the financial gain of themselves and their tribe. And they hide behind the law to do it. As I've held up signs in front of the district attorney's office, the FBI office, and other places over the past few days again, more victims have continued to reach out to me, and stories continue to become more and more horrific. I'll share some of these stories in the next video. If you don't think you have the stomach for it, that's fine. I get it. When I first started finding out about this, it was horrifying too. So stand on me. Let me fix this. Because I can do that. And one of the best ways is by starting a new Utah State Bar and letting the old one drag itself to wherever it's going. It would help if you would head over to Utah DAP, D-A-P, like DAP, like fist bump DAP.com. There's a spot you can pledge a monthly donation through credit card or Venmo or whatever, until we can get a yard sign on every yard in Utah. And for those that don't have one, I'd like to hear why. This is all critical because not only are Utah's grown-ups being exploited, Utah's children are being exploited as well. And we simply cannot allow that to happen anymore with what we now know. If you are one of the good attorneys of Utah State Bar, and there's plenty of attorneys out there in constructive practices doing amazing things for the greater good. And I'm not even going to bother listing it. it is so vast. There are thousands of members of Utah State Bar involved in these greater good causes. But I think that's also part of Utah State Bar's illusions, is that it hides behind them so it can allow thousands of others to do these horrible things. I would look forward to hearing from you and anyone, especially those who have their own horror stories to tell about what happened to them in any of those types of cases in the Matheson courthouse or Utah's other courtrooms. One of the worst examples, or the worst loopholes or poisonous pills that we have discovered, is that there are imposter members of Utah State Bar posing as attorneys who are intentionally overdosing their own clients with an imitation of the law designed to be so painful that the client eventually commits suicide to stop the pain, and the attorneys can then rob tens of thousands of dollars more from them, and then they can blame it all on the dead client. And you can find more about that at works, WERXUSA.com as well. Along the way, these imitations are dragged out to take years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years or more for these types of cases. When if attorneys have these issues of their own, they magically get them done within a few weeks. So know that if you've had loved ones who committed suicide during a case like this, this is what really happened. It was intentional. They were being overdosed with these illusions. And when you were getting those bills for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 and $80,000, $100,000, and no one would return your calls, now you know why. It was by design from the beginning. These imposters will do this by artificially inflating bills by tens of thousands of dollars along the way. If people question it, they will put a lien on their home to take it, and they're doing this to their own clients, and then they withdraw as their clients. So the whole thing is by design from the beginning, for an imposter to disguise a vulnerable person as a client, just to run this scheme on them. I have reported this in person to Governor Spencer Cox, Gary Herbert before him, who we all know was corrupt anyway. Thank you to the Ogden Standard Examiner, and no one in the responsible roles here in Utah ever did anything about that. So no surprise that Herbert didn't do anything. Cox was his lieutenant governor. Cox hasn't done anything. He's also a member of Utah State Bar, so that makes sense there. So is Attorney General Sean Reyes. I've personally delivered letters to his office asking for 15 minutes just to share parts of this. Nothing. And then you've got the stories that have come in about Sim Gill covering a forgery by an imposter member of Utah State Bar, Chief Wayne Dial of Unified Police. And I'll end this video here for now. But then the other one, I'll go in and talk about some more of these stories. And I look forward to hearing from you and us fixing all of this for the greater good.